It was a cold morning in the city. People walked quickly, holding hot coffee cups, looking at their phones, not at each other. On the sidewalk near a busy store, a man sat alone. His clothes were dirty. His coat was too big and full of holes. His hair was messy and gray. His skin was dark, and his beard was thick. Most people didn't look at him. Some looked and then turned their heads away. A few whispered to each other, "He's probably a drunk." Others crossed the street just to avoid him. The man didn't beg. He didn't talk. He just sat there, holding a small paper cup with a few coins in it. His name was Joe, but no one knew that. To the people walking past, he was just a homeless black man on the sidewalk. Two young police officers walked by. Their uniforms were clean, and they were laughing. "Hey," one of them said, nudging his partner. "Look at this guy. Probably hasn't worked a day in his life." The other officer smirked. "Or maybe he's just lazy, sitting here waiting for handouts." Joe didn't say a word. He didn't look up. He just sat there, still and quiet, like a statue. "What's wrong, old man?" the first cop said louder. "Cat got your tongue?" Joe slowly looked up. His eyes were tired, but there was something sharp in them, something different. He stared at the officer for a long second. Then he said in a calm, quiet voice, "You don't know who I am." The officers laughed. "Oh yeah," the second one said. "Who are you? The king of the sidewalk?" Joe didn't answer. He looked away, back at the ground. Behind them, an older woman sat on a bench with her granddaughter. She had been watching everything. She leaned close to the little girl and whispered, "I think that's him." The girl looked confused. "Who, Grandma?" The old woman didn't answer right away. Her eyes were wide. Her voice shook as she said, "That man. I saw his face years ago. In the news. He was a soldier, a war hero." Back on the sidewalk, the officers kept laughing. "You know what?" one of them said. "Let's come back later with some food. Maybe teach him how to clean himself up." Joe closed his eyes. He remembered the desert heat, the sound of gunfire, and the faces of men he once fought beside. He remembered being young, strong, respected. But now, he was just a dirty man on a city sidewalk. People began to gather slowly. A few watched the scene from a distance. Some took out their phones to record. One man said, "Hey, leave the guy alone." The officer turned around. "Mind your business." Joe stood up slowly. He was tall and strong, even in his old clothes. He stood straight, his back stiff like a soldier. The officer stepped back, a little surprised. There was something in his stance, something military. Joe looked right at them and said in a low, strong voice, "You two are brave when you're talking to a homeless man. But would you speak the same way to a green Beret sniper?" The street went silent. The two officers stared at him. "What did you say?" one of them asked, his voice less confident now. Joe stepped closer. He whispered a long string of numbers and letters, military codes. He didn't explain them. He just said them, then turned and walked back to his spot, sitting down quietly again. The officers looked at each other. One laughed nervously. "He's crazy." But the other one didn't laugh. His face had gone pale. He took out his phone and started typing the numbers into a search bar. The old woman on the bench nodded slowly, whispering again to her granddaughter. "His name is Joe Carter," she said. "I remember now. He was one of the best, a sniper. They said he saved a whole unit once. Then he disappeared." The little girl looked at Joe. "Why is he homeless then?" The woman looked sad. "Some people come back from war, and the war never leaves them." The police officers walked away, quieter than before. One kept looking back at Joe, confused and unsure. Joe sat still once again, birds pecking near his feet. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small torn photo. It showed a young man in uniform, smiling proudly, next to another soldier. Joe stared at it for a long time. He whispered to himself, "They forgot me. But I didn't forget them." The camera slowly zooms in on his face. His eyes are full of stories. The city lights flickered as the cold night fell. Joe sat under a bridge now, wrapped in a worn-out blanket. His back leaned against the stone wall, and beside him lay a small bag, his only belongings. Above him, cars rushed by, their lights blinking through the cracks of the bridge. But Joe didn't hear them. His mind was far away. He closed his eyes, and the memories came back. The sand, the heat, the sound of helicopters above, the shouting of his team. He saw his best friend, Mason, smiling in the sun just before the attack. Then the explosion, the dust, the blood. Joe opened his eyes fast, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. He looked down at them and whispered, "It should have been me." For Joe, the war had never ended. The next morning, the two young officers returned. They were laughing again, holding hot coffee and breakfast sandwiches. They looked well-fed, well-rested, and full of energy. But this time, they didn't just walk past Joe. They stopped. "Good morning, soldier," one of them joked, nudging his partner. "Still guarding the sidewalk?" Joe looked up slowly. His eyes were calm but sharp. There was something deep in them now. Something different. Something that made the younger cop stop smiling for a moment. "Thought you'd like some breakfast," the other officer said, holding out a sandwich. Joe didn't take it. He just stared. "What's the problem?" The first cop said, annoyed. "We're trying to help you, old man." Joe stood up again. His height surprised them. Even in his ragged clothes, he looked powerful. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. But there was something in his voice when he spoke, something cold. "You want to help," he said. "Then stop pretending I'm a joke." The officers looked at each other. The second cop, the quieter one, said carefully, "You said something yesterday about being a green beret, a sniper." Joe nodded. "I said enough." Then he said it again, those strange numbers and letters. This time, slower. Echo 47, Operation Sandstorm, Charlie 9. Confirmed sniper support, Target 0. The officers stared at him. That's not just gibberish," the second one whispered. Joe turned and sat back down, his eyes on the street again. The first cop rolled his eyes. "He's making it up." But the second cop wasn't so sure. He pulled out his phone and quietly typed the words into a search engine. Nothing came up until he tried a special government website for veterans. He typed the code again. The screen blinked. ACES-TNIT, restricted information. His face went pale. He leaned closer and tried again with just the name. Joe Carter, Green Beret. A file popped up. It had a black and white photo of a young soldier in uniform. His face was sharp. His eyes were the same, strong, cold, calm. Underneath the picture, Joseph Carter, U.S. Army Special Forces, Sniper. Medal of Honor, Purple Heart, Silver Star. 67 confirmed missions. Saved Major Brooks, 2003. The young officer dropped his phone in shock. He looked at Joe again. The homeless man with the torn coat, the dirty boots, the tired eyes. But now, he saw something else. A ghost of greatness. A man built like stone. A warrior, hiding in plain sight. The other cop laughed nervously. "What? Did you find something?" The second one didn't answer right away. He slowly sat down beside Joe. "Sir," he said quietly, "why are you out here? Why not go back to the army? You were a hero." Joe turned his head. He didn't look angry, just tired. "I came back, but the world didn't." He took a deep breath. "Lost my wife while I was overseas. She died waiting for me. No family, no home, and no one cared." The younger cop swallowed hard. "But the military, your medals, your record." Joe shook his head. "Medals don't keep you warm at night. They don't stop the memories. And they don't fix what's broken." The officer looked down at his shoes. Joe added softly, "Sometimes the real battle starts after the war ends." The city moved around them. Cars honked. People rushed past. But now, a few were stopping. A woman nearby took a photo and shared it online with the caption, "This homeless man used to be a hero." Within minutes, the story began to spread. More and more people stopped by. Some brought food. Others brought blankets. One man offered a room for the night. But Joe stayed quiet. He didn't want pity. All he wanted was respect. That night, the officers stood at the edge of the sidewalk. watching him from a distance. "I feel awful," the first cop finally said. "Yeah," the other replied. "He's not just some homeless guy, he's a legend." Then he added, "Tomorrow, I'm digging deeper. There's more to this." Joe lay down on the cold concrete, the stars shining above him. He pulled the old blanket over his body and stared at the sky. In his mind, he wasn't under a bridge anymore. He was lying in the desert again, rifle in hand, stars overhead, protecting his team. The next morning was quiet, but something had changed. Joe was still sitting under the same bridge. His blanket was folded neatly beside him. He stared at the sidewalk, not moving much, just thinking. But across the street, something different was happening. The younger police officer, Officer Daniels, was sitting in his patrol car. He wasn't laughing now. His face was serious. His laptop was open, and the screen showed a file with the name. Joseph Carter, classified veteran record. Daniels had gone home the night before and couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Joe's face, kept hearing his calm voice, and those strange numbers, the military codes. He decided to dig deeper. Now, as he read the file, his eyes grew wider. He scrolled down slowly, line by line. Green Beret sniper. 67 missions. Survived 3 ambushes. Saved Major Brooks during Operation Sandstorm. Took out 12 enemies in 1 mission. Daniels blinked hard. This wasn't just a soldier. This was a legend. He kept reading. Awarded the Silver Star, Purple Heart, and the Medal of Honor. Went missing after retirement. Last seen 10 years ago. Listed as off the grid. Daniels leaned back in shock. Off the grid meant the military had lost track of Joe. No one knew where he went, until now. Across town, in a quiet office at the Department of Veterans Affairs, an older woman named Sandra was sipping her tea. She worked with veteran records and helped soldiers get their benefits. She received an email that morning with a photo attached. It was blurry, taken from a phone camera. She clicked on it and froze. Her cup nearly slipped from her hand. It was a photo of Joe, but not young Joe, old Joe, on the street, homeless. Sandra gasped. No, it can't be. She hadn't seen that face in years. She thought he was dead. Sandra picked up the phone and called her boss. "Sir, I think we found Joseph Carter." There was silence on the other end. "Are you sure?" her boss asked. "I'd stake my job on it," she said. Back under the bridge, Joe was sitting quietly when a man in a suit approached him. He was tall, clean, and clearly not from the streets. Joe noticed him right away. "I don't need money," Joe said. The man nodded. "I'm not here to give you money, sir. I'm here to give you respect." Joe looked at him, confused. The man pulled something from his coat pocket, a folded piece of paper with a gold seal on it. "My name is Marcus Hill, and I work for the Office of Military Affairs. We've been looking for you, Sergeant Carter." Joe blinked slowly. "I'm not a sergeant anymore." "To us, you always will be," Marcus replied. Joe didn't speak. Marcus knelt beside him and opened the letter. "This is a personal letter from General Brooks, the man you saved years ago. He's been searching for you since the war ended." Joe stared at the name. For a moment, his fingers shook as he held the paper. He didn't open it yet. Then he asked quietly, "Why now? Why do they care now?" Marcus looked him straight in the eye. "Because the world may forget its heroes, but real soldiers never do." Meanwhile, Officer Daniels was still reading Joe's file in the patrol car when his partner returned. "You still on that old guy?" the partner asked. Daniels shook his head. "He's not just an old guy. He's Joseph Carter, the man who saved a general, took 67 missions, and disappeared into silence." His partner scoffed. "So what? That doesn't mean we treat him different now." Daniels stood up. "No, that means we treat everyone better from now on." Back under the bridge, more people were showing up. A news crew arrived, then a few veterans from the local VFW post. One of them, an old white man in a wheelchair, called out, "Joe Carter, is that really you?" Joe looked up. For the first time in days, he smiled. It was Tommy, a man he had served with long ago. They hugged. Both men cried. They didn't care who was watching. Someone took a picture. Someone else started a live stream. And soon, the entire city was watching a moment of truth, a forgotten soldier being remembered. Marcus handed Joe a card. "We have a place for you. A veteran's home, warm meals, counseling, everything you deserve." Joe looked down at the card. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. Then he said something soft, something only Marcus could hear. "If I go back, I don't want pity. I want purpose." Marcus smiled. "Then we'll give you that." Joe nodded slowly. And for the first time in a long time, he stood up without feeling alone. By the next morning, the city was buzzing. What started as a quiet moment under a cold bridge had turned into something much bigger, a movement. A woman named Clara, who passed by Joe the day before, had posted a short video of him online. It showed him sitting quietly, wrapped in a blanket. Then it showed the officer reading his file with a shocked look. The final shot was of Joe hugging another veteran, both men crying. She wrote, "This homeless man is a forgotten war hero. He saved lives, and now he sleeps on the street." At first, only a few people noticed. But then a retired army colonel saw it. Then a journalist. Then a famous actor. And then the video went viral. Within 24 hours, the video had over 2 million views. Thousands of people were sharing it, commenting, "How could we let this happen? He's a real American hero. This man deserves a home, not a sidewalk." At the police station, Officer Daniels stared at his phone in disbelief. His own face was in the video. So was his partner. And Joe. His inbox was full of messages from people all over the country. One message read, "Thank you for showing him respect. My father was also a vet. You gave me hope." Daniels looked at the screen and felt a strange emotion building in his chest, pride, but also shame. He thought about how they laughed at Joe just days ago. Now the whole world was watching and judging. His partner wasn't happy. "This is a mess," he said, tossing his phone down. "We look like fools." Daniels didn't answer. He just said, "We were fools." Back under the bridge, Joe didn't know he was famous. He sat in the same spot, eating a warm sandwich someone had left for him. People passed by, whispering and pointing. A few dropped notes, thanking him. Some even left flowers. One little girl walked up shyly and handed him a drawing. It showed a soldier in uniform with a heart over his head. Joe looked at it, his hands trembling slightly. "Is that me?" he asked. The girl nodded. "My dad said you're a real hero." Joe smiled. It was small, but real. "Thank you," he said. She ran back to her mother, waving. Not far away, General Brooks, now retired and living in Washington, D.C., sat in his study with a tablet in his hand. He watched the video of Joe hugging an old friend and felt his eyes fill with tears. He hadn't seen Joe in over 10 years. Joe had vanished after the war. No phone calls, no emails, nothing. And now, he was on the internet, sitting alone in rags. Brooks called his assistant. "I need a flight," he said. "I'm going to meet Sergeant Carter. Today." That afternoon, a news van pulled up near Joe's bridge. A young reporter stepped out with a cameraman. She walked up slowly, not wanting to scare him. "Sir," she said gently, "I'm from Channel 5 News. Would you mind if we talk to you for a moment?" Joe didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Only if you ask real questions." The reporter nodded. "Like what?" Joe looked straight at the camera. His voice was soft but strong. "Why do we forget the people we send to fight? Why do we remember them only when they're gone?" The reporter was silent. So was the cameraman. Joe continued, "There are thousands like me. Not all of us are famous. Not all of us get lucky. But all of us gave something. Some gave everything." The video was live. And within minutes, social media exploded again. People everywhere were sharing the new clip. Comment sections were filled with fire emojis and tears. "He speaks the truth. He's not just a sniper. He's a voice for all veterans. Give this man a platform." By evening, people started showing up in groups. Veterans, students, mothers with kids. They brought food, clothes, sleeping bags, even job offers. One man came with a guitar and sang a song he wrote just for Joe. The chorus echoed under the bridge. You fought our war, we closed our door. Now we come back to love you more. Joe sat quietly, watching them all. He didn't speak much. He didn't need to. His eyes said everything. Back at the Department of Veterans Affairs, Sandra watched the live coverage with tears in her eyes. We failed him, she whispered. Her boss nodded. Yes, but now we fix it. That night, Joe lay down under the stars again, but this time it was different. He wasn't alone. Candles glowed around him. A group of young men stood silently nearby, guarding his space. A group of veterans were sharing stories by a small fire. Joe looked at the sky and said softly, maybe I'm not invisible anymore. But far away, in a tall building with tinted windows, a mysterious man in a dark suit watched the news on a big screen. He frowned. He picked up his phone and said just 3 words. We found him. Far away from the warm crowd around Joe, in a tall glass building in Washington, D.C., a man in a dark suit stood in front of a giant screen. His name was Director Alan Burke. He worked in a secret division of the government, one that dealt with top-level missions and classified soldiers. Joe Carter used to be one of them. Burke watched the news stream in silence. He saw Joe sitting under the bridge. He saw people crying. He saw General Brooks boarding a plane. And then Burke whispered, this can't happen. In the office behind him, files were stacked high. Many were red-stamped with the word classified. One thick folder had Joe's name on it. Burke opened it and stared at the final mission report from 10 years ago. It ended with these words. Subject, Joseph Carter. Mission completed. Disappeared without trace. Presumed retired or deceased. But Joe hadn't died. He had vanished, for a reason. A deep secret was buried in that file. One that no one had dared to speak about. Not even General Brooks. Meanwhile, back in the city, Joe sat with a small crowd of supporters. He was quiet, listening to old war songs being sung by young kids. Someone gave him a jacket. Another brought shoes. But Joe's eyes kept drifting toward the trees across the road. His instincts were sharp. Even after all these years, he could feel when someone was watching him. And someone was watching. A black car sat parked across the street. Tinted windows. Engines still running. Inside sat a man wearing an earpiece. He spoke softly into a small mic. Target is calm. No threat. But he senses us. From the other end, a voice replied, don't engage. Not yet. Wait for Director Burke's orders. Across town, General Brooks finally arrived at the location. He stepped out of a black SUV, wearing a simple coat. No medals. No uniform. Just a look of guilt and hope on his face. He walked straight toward Joe, ignoring the cameras and crowds. Joe stood slowly. The 2 men stared at each other for a long moment. And then General Brooks spoke. You saved my life. And I couldn't even find you. Joe didn't reply. Brooks stepped closer. I spent years searching. You disappeared, and I thought you were gone forever. Joe's voice was low and rough. I was. They sat on the bench together. Brooks sighed. There's something you should know, Joe, he said. But before he could speak, a black car suddenly pulled up. 2 men in suits stepped out. One of them showed a badge. Mr. Carter, we need to speak with you. In private. The crowd grew quiet. Brooks stood protectively in front of Joe. He's not a threat. He's a hero. One agent replied coldly. This isn't about threats. This is about national security. Joe raised his hand. It's okay. He walked with them toward the car. As he got in, he looked back at the crowd. One boy saluted him. Joe nodded once. The door closed, and the car drove away. Inside the black car, silence filled the space. Then one of the agents handed Joe a folder. Director Burke wants you to read this. Joe opened the folder slowly. Inside were photos, maps, and one page with a single sentence. You weren't just on a mission, Joe. You were part of a cover-up. Joe's hands tightened. He remembered the last mission, Operation Ghost Wind. It was supposed to be a rescue mission, but something went wrong. Something dark. He looked up. "Why are you showing me this now?" The agent answered, "Because someone else is digging into it. If the truth comes out, it could shake everything." Joe leaned back. "So now you need the ghost to protect the lie?" The agent didn't respond. Back at the bridge, the crowd was confused. General Brooks tried to calm them. "He's not under arrest," he explained. "They just need answers. But I won't let them use him again." Sandra from the Veterans Department arrived and stood with Brooks. "I checked the records," she said. "They sealed most of Joe's missions. He was silenced on purpose." Brooks nodded. "And now that he's back in the light, they're scared." In the car, Joe finally spoke. "If you want my help, you give me one thing first." The agent raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Joe looked straight ahead and said, "The truth. All of it. No lies. No secrets." The agent hesitated, then handed Joe a second folder. It had a lock code on it. "Only Buck can open that one." Joe smirked. "Then let's go see him." That night, a message appeared online from an anonymous source. It showed documents, photos, and a headline that made the country freeze. "Decorated sniper was silenced after secret mission. Government tried to erase him." People started asking questions. Joe had become more than a symbol. He had become a threat to lies. And somewhere in a dark office, Director Burke whispered, "He's back, and this time, he might bring the whole system down." The black car pulled up outside a government building with no name, no flag, and no windows. Joe stepped out, his face calm, but his mind racing. He had seen this place before, years ago, when he was still Sergeant Carter, the sharpest sniper in the Green Berets. He was not here to take orders this time. He was here for answers. Inside, Director Burke sat at a long metal table in a cold gray room. Cameras were hidden in every corner. 2 guards stood silently near the door. He looked up when Joe entered, but didn't smile. "Joe," he said, "it's been a long time." Joe didn't sit. "You wanted me," he said. "Now talk." Burke motioned to the chair. "You'll want to sit for this." Joe stayed standing. Burke sighed and opened the locked folder. He pushed it across the table. Inside were photographs, maps, satellite images, and one single page, a report Joe thought was destroyed years ago. Joe stared at it. He remembered it like it happened yesterday. 10 years ago, Joe was sent on a mission called Operation Ghost Wind. The public was told it was a rescue mission, but that was a lie. The real target wasn't a hostage. It was a scientist. A man who had created a dangerous new weapon, a virus that could wipe out entire cities. Joe's job was to eliminate the threat quietly, without alerting the world. Joe completed the mission. But then he found something that changed everything. The virus hadn't come from a foreign country. It was American-made. The project had been hidden deep inside the government. Joe reported it. And for that, they erased him. "I saw the truth," Joe said now, his voice cold. "And you made me disappear." Buck didn't deny it. "We had no choice." Joe slammed his hand on the table. "You always have a choice." Buck leaned forward. "You don't understand. If that information had gone public, millions would have panicked. The country wasn't ready." Joe narrowed his eyes. "So you let me rot on the street for 10 years? Buck looked down. "You were a ghost, Joe. You were never supposed to come back." Back in the city, the story was spreading fast. The anonymous leak had opened a storm. News channels, veterans groups, and even politicians were demanding answers. General Brooks held a press conference. "This man gave everything for this country," he said. "And when he found the truth, they buried him. I won't let that happen again." People across the country took to the streets with signs. "Justice for Joe. Truth over power. Bring the hero home." Sandra, from the Veterans Department, worked around the clock. She gathered proof, files, and testimonies from other soldiers. Many of them had stories just like Joe's, silenced, forgotten, and betrayed. They all pointed back to one thing: Operation Ghost Wind. And now, someone was ready to blow the whole secret open. In the gray room, Burke stared at Joe. "You're a hero, Joe. But heroes die in silence. That's how this world works." Joe stood tall. "Not anymore." He turned to leave. But Burke said one more thing. "There's a reason you're still alive." Joe paused. "You weren't just a soldier, Joe. You were chosen for that mission because of what you are. Calm, sharp, loyal. You were the perfect weapon." Joe shook his head. "I'm not a weapon." Burke's voice dropped. "Then what are you?" Joe turned slowly. "I'm the truth you're afraid of." That night, Joe appeared on live TV for the first time. He didn't wear a uniform. He wore a simple jacket and held a letter in his hand. He looked into the camera and began. "My name is Joseph Carter. I served in the U.S. Army for 18 years. I was part of missions no one speaks about. Missions that cost me everything. But I did them because I believed in this country. I believed in truth. And now I'm here to tell you that truth." The world listened. Tears fell. He spoke about Operation Ghost Wind, about the virus, about how he was silenced, and about the people he lost because he stayed quiet. By the end of the broadcast, people were outside the Capitol building holding candles. Veterans stood side by side with students, mothers, and even police officers. Joe had become more than a soldier. He was a symbol of justice, of truth, and of hope. Back at the hidden building, Burke watched the broadcast. He didn't speak. He knew what was coming. Investigations, trials, questions. But deep down, he also knew something else. Joe Carter had won. He didn't need a gun. He didn't need to hide. He stood in the open and told the truth. And the whole world stood with him. The next morning, Joe stood on the steps of the Veterans Hall. He looked out at the sea of faces. Then he smiled for the first time in years. Someone in the crowd shouted, "We see you, Joe." And for the first time, he believed it. 1 week had passed since Joe Carter's story broke the internet. The world had changed. For the first time in years, people were talking about the forgotten ones, the veterans who gave everything and got nothing in return. Joe Carter's name was everywhere. News channels called him a hero. Social media called him the ghost who spoke. But for Joe, the attention wasn't what he wanted. He didn't speak up to become famous. He spoke up because the truth needed a voice. On a rainy Monday morning, Joe stood at Arlington National Cemetery. He wore a clean black coat, and beside him stood General Brooks and Sandra from the Veterans Department. They were not there for a show. They were there for the brothers he lost during Operation Ghost Wind. "Those men were buried with lies," Joe said, kneeling at the grave of his best friend, S.G. Kyle Harris. But not anymore. He placed a medal on the headstone, not a military medal, but a small round badge that said, "Truth never dies." That same day, something happened that no one expected. The President of the United States made a live announcement from the White House. She looked into the camera and said, to Sergeant Joseph Carter, "We failed you. This nation failed you. But now, we make it right." Joe, sitting in a quiet room, watched as she held up a small box. Inside it was the Medal of Honor, the highest award in the military. The medal was being given for bravery, loyalty, and the courage to speak the truth when it was most dangerous. Joe's hands shook. He never expected this. And part of him didn't want it. But something bigger happened the next day. A new bill was introduced in Congress. It was called the Carter Act. Its goal was simple: protect whistleblowers in the military, provide mental health care for forgotten veterans, unseal records of missions where justice had been hidden. The Carter Act passed unanimously. Joe had not only spoken up, he had changed the system. 2 months later, a ceremony was held in Washington, D.C. But Joe made one condition: no big stage, no loud music, just the people who matter. So they held the ceremony outside, under a big tree at the Veteran Memorial Garden. The crowd was quiet. No one cheered, no one clapped. They just stood and listened. General Brooks pinned the Medal of Honor on Joe's coat, then stepped back and saluted. Joe didn't say much. He looked at the crowd and said only, "This medal isn't just mine. It's for every soldier they tried to forget, every homeless vet who still sleeps under a bridge, every man and woman who gave everything and got nothing back. We see you now, and we won't forget." Then he stepped off the stage. No fancy speeches, just truth, just Joe. Later that evening, Joe returned to the same place where the police had once mocked him, under the old bridge where he used to sleep. But this time something had changed. The place had been cleaned up. A new bench had been installed. On it, a bronze plate read, "In honor of Joseph Carter, a soldier, a truth-teller, a man of quiet strength." Joe sat down on the bench, looking at the city lights. Kids were playing nearby. A young black boy rode by on a bike, stopped, and looked at Joe. "Are you the guy from TV?" the boy asked shyly. Joe smiled. "I might be." The boy grinned. "You're cool." Joe nodded. "So are you. Stay strong." And the boy rode off, waving. As the sun set, Sandra joined him. She brought 2 cups of coffee and sat beside him. "You okay?" she asked. Joe looked at the sky and said, "I think so. For the first time in years, I don't feel invisible." She smiled. "You've done more than speak. You've healed people." Joe sipped his coffee and nodded. "But the work's not done." "No," she agreed. "But now, they're listening." Far away, in the same government building where Director Burke had once ruled with silence, things were different now too. Burke had resigned. New leaders had taken over. People were reviewing every secret file from the past 20 years. Because of Joe. That night, Joe walked down the city street alone. But this time, people didn't turn away. They stopped him. They shook his hand. They thanked him. He didn't need riches. He didn't need power. He had truth. And now, he had peace. As he reached the corner of the street, he looked back at the city. A soft smile crossed his face. He whispered to himself, "For every soldier out there who still feels forgotten, keep fighting. Keep speaking. Because one voice can change the world."